Bit of a scorcher here today in Sussex, so I'm just going to show you how I try and keep my poor hens cool. Luckily, as you can see by my hair, there's a bit of a breeze, so it's not quite as terrible as it could be, but it's certainly well above 30, and my garden faces south, so it's proper scorchio. But I'm going to give them some melon, which I've actually just put in the freezer for a bit. I'm really sorry, this is a Piel de Sapper melon, which is really lovely, so I do apologise to my other half who got it for me, but anyway, needs must, and only the best for my chooks. They love melons and squashes and any of that kind of family. They love the pips as well, which actually contain a kind of natural wormer, or rather a sort of the kind of mucus around the edge of the seeds is sort of inhibits the growth of kind of worms and internal parasites. So it's not exactly a wormer, it's more that it's kind of promotes really good sort of internal gut health for the chickens. They love watermelon, and so just pop it in the fridge or indeed the freezer for a bit to really cool it down for them, and as you can see they tuck in and it's really lovely and refreshing for them. Put it somewhere in the shade. They don't really mind the heat, they prefer, you know, especially when it's just really dry heat, but they you can see there Wendy is slightly sort of putting out her wings. As you can see she's sort of just giving her armpits a bit of air and panting a bit. That's completely normal. That's how they keep cool. But yeah, make sure they have really fresh water. They won't drink water if it's too warm. A bit diva-ish when it comes to that sort of thing. So look at Wendy. So yeah, make sure you kind of keep their water buckets and drinkers freshly filled with nice cold water, and you can put the sort of warm water on your poor beleaguered plants if they're anything like mine. But yeah, just anything to keep them nice and cool. Obviously let them go somewhere in the shade. Oh, thank you. Let them have nice shade. These four are in a coop which is a bit small, so I'll just let them out for some extra time so that they can cool off a bit. But yeah, it's they can get, you know, they can overheat because obviously their feathers are nice and insulating. But nice cool water, plenty of shade, and some cool snacks. You can, you know, put any kind of, you know, if you've got some berries, you know, pick some brambles, put them in the fridge overnight, and then give them to them. Anything to kind of cool them down a bit. Jason? There are two types of mite which affect chickens. One is a scaly leg mite, which, as the name suggests, lives on their legs, and the other is a red mite, not to be confused with red spider mite, which you sometimes get in greenhouses and stuff like that. The red mite is a different. It's a little blood-sucking parasite, and it feeds on them at night. So you have to kind of be a bit mindful of where their perches are, and to check and make sure their perches aren't becoming infested. It's really easy at this time of year when it suddenly gets really hot for you to suddenly get a burgeoning infestation. And I'll show you what to look for with the perches. It is worse with kind of handmade perches of sort of logs or sticks and that kind of thing. So we just need to be a bit careful of those. But I'll show you the kind of where they hang out and what to look for in your coop regarding red mite. This is a nest box I took out of a coop which did have a bit of an infestation. It's up here as well. You see this kind of white kind of, it's not a powder, it doesn't kind of scrape off, but that's basically mite poo. And as you can see, it tends to, they congregate at night time in any little sort of harbourage, so any nooks and crannies, and they'll hide in the bedding and yeah, any kind of joints, cracks, seals. You can see there again the white sort of looks like dust, but like I said, it won't scrape off. And if you start seeing that in your coops or by your perches, it does show you've got a bit of a problem. You don't often see the mites themselves because they are minuscule, but if you see lots of a congregation of little sort of black red dots when you lift up the perch, those are the engorged mites which will have been feeding on your chooks overnight, and it can make them a bit sad and debilitated, but I'll show you what I do to get rid of them, which doesn't involve any nasty chemicals. The best thing I find to use is actually boiling water. Something else you can use if you have a bit of a mite problem on both the chickens and in the coops is something called diatomaceous earth, which is this kind of powdery stuff here. You can kind of shake that around quite liberally, put it in the dust baths and put it in the coops, on the perches and that kind of thing. And basically the dust kind of, it's so fine it desiccates the exoskeleton of the mites and kind of basically dries them out, shrivels them up. It is, I say it's perfectly safe in so much it's just ground, very finely ground powder, but you do have to be a bit careful because obviously what damages the kind of mite can also damage our mucous membrane. So, oh, sorry, the chickens there, if you can see them there, hiding from the heat. So it's probably a good idea if you're going to use this to just don a mask, which obviously living as we do in the age of COVID we all have now, but yeah, just be careful you're not sort of breathing it in and that kind of thing. And you've got to be a little bit careful of the hens as well, so if you're going to shake it around the coops, do it while they're out and let it kind of settle and keep the door shut so it's not sort of flying around everywhere. But yeah, it's good stuff and it's not that expensive, and I buy it by the sack. So oh, she's off picking blackberries again. So it's not like I said, it's not that expensive. It lasts a long time if you keep it dry, so just keep it in a dustbin, and yeah, you can sort of sprinkle it around quite liberally when you're cleaning the chickens out. Very hot. Don't be surprised if your chickens go off lay when it's really, really hot like this. They don't tend to eat quite so much when it's really toasty, which obviously affects how much they can lay. But yeah, it's very common for them to not lay so many eggs when they're really hot or if the weather's really hot. Same goes for if they're really cold actually, or really wet. They're a bit southern rail sometimes, but yeah, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if I don't get any eggs for the rest of the week with it being like this. You're alright, aren't you, Duckles, with the paddling pool? I've got Wendy here who's, oh, stop squawking. She's got something called scaly leg, which I'll show you. Oh, that's not the right end. You can see here, her scales are all a bit horrible. So I need to put some, oh, will you be quiet? I need to put some, shush! I need to put some oil on them, and I'm using this, which is rather lovely, but you can use Vaseline. Oh, please. You can use Vaseline, but I prefer using a sort of vegetable oil. You set everyone off now. Shush, shush, shush. So basically, I don't she's going to let me show you. Shush, shush, shush. You set everyone off now. Listen, can you hear everyone? That's your fault. But basically, oh, I just get a handful of the oil and I just rub it into her legs. Wait there. This just basically starves the mites of air, of oxygen, and it's quite soothing for the hen as well, because it can be quite sore for them. So it just kind of soothes their skin. And obviously, oh dear missus, if you're just using a vegetable oil, it doesn't matter if they groom themselves or kind of preen it or anything. That's why I like to use something kind of food safe. There we go. Dear, oh dear. Try not to get too much on their feathers. But you just need to try and do this kind of 2 or 3 times a week. Oh dear. There we go. Very cross chicken. I'm going to make a sourdough focaccia, except I forgot I decided to film it for the vlog, so I'm kind of a little bit ahead of where I kind of technically would be. So basically I'm using a rye starter. I'm actually using my friend's starter because he's on holiday and he gave it to me to babysit, and he's actually looking a little bit livelier than mine, so I'm using his starter. But it's a rye starter, same as mine, so I'll leave mine to sulk for a little bit more because I got it some new flour and it's pouting a bit. But anyway, so when I make focaccia, I really just make the same basic sourdough recipe that I always use, only I up the water a little bit and down the flour a little bit, because you want it sort of really high hydration so it gets lovely big air pockets. It does mean it's a little bit harder to handle, but you're not having to shape it or score it or do anything like that. You're just going to tip it into a tin. So it doesn't matter if it's a bit kind of sloppier than your regular sourdough loaf mixture. What am I saying? You know what I mean, sourdough dough. I never know if that's tautological to say sourdough dough, but anyway. So this is yeah, this is a very soft dough and it's quite difficult to handle, so you wouldn't really want to be doing much sort of outside of the bowl or the tin. And so what I've got here is 150 grams of starter, almost 375 to 400 grams of water, and then 475 grams of just ordinary strong white, organic strong white flour. I don't really think focaccia is the time to go to sort of wholemeal, because it needs that sort of light airiness to it. So I also don't add any kind of seeds or anything to it, because again the sort of is really just meant to be a sort of nice tasty fluffy base to the toppings that you caught myself on the drawer. Nice tasty toppings that you put on. So we've got a heat wave here at the moment in the UK, so I've already had the oven on blasting heat for my sourdough that I made earlier, and this will have to go on a bit later. But you know, I've got a friend coming round for dinner, well, salad this evening, and I thought focaccia would be nice for that, and I also wanted to show you guys what I do. So I also put in a sort of heaped teaspoonful of honey. As I said before, I'm a beekeeper, so I've got my jar of beekeeper's dregs. So you can see it's got, this is basically what I scrape out at the bottom of the tub when I've finished extracting the honey, so it's all sort of different types, but it's just as yummy. So I put a teaspoonful of honey in there, and I've just whisked it up as usual, and then added the flour, and then I folded it in with the scraper. I'm just putting 8 grams of salt in, because you put salt on the top when you just before you bake it with the oil, and also it doesn't really need a huge amount of strength and structure, so I want it quite sort of big and bubbly, so I'm just using a slightly lower amount of salt. Mix that in. You can see it's already a much sort of looser, floppier dough than the usual sourdough I make. I'll be doing a few folds with this, probably using the scraper because it's very icky and sticky, and then I'll plop it into the tin and then leave it to sort of rise until, you know, just before I need to bake it. The dough's had a little bit of time to do its thing, and you can see it's kind of a bit wibbly wobbly. That's fine. I've got a pan here, which you can see I've got quite a lot of oil in it, and that's quite important because it needs to kind of, when you put the dough in, it needs to kind of be bathed in oil, if you like. You certainly don't want it sticking. So I'm just going to grab my pastry brush and give it a good old basting up the sides as well. There we go. So this is, like I said, quite a sort of runny dough, so it's not so much a question of lifting out, it's kind of pouring out basically. So I'm just going to pour a bit more oil around the dough, because what I want to do is kind of, where I'd normally use flour, I'm kind of using oil, so I just want to kind of make sure it's actually got oil all around it, so you kind of do the folds in the tin, and I'm just going to kind of ease it out to the edges, try and even it out a bit. It will kind of spring back, although it's a very floppy dough. It does have some structure to it. It doesn't look like it, but it does. So I'm now just going to leave this. I'm now going to leave this with a towel over it, just in the kitchen, because obviously it doesn't necessarily need to, you know, be slowed down. If you did want to cook this the next day, by all means put it in the fridge or somewhere cool, and I will be back to do the dimpling in a little while. Now I like my bread kind of properly cooked, but if you prefer yours a little less kind of toasted, see I love all these bits, yum, you probably need to give it about 5 minutes less. I mean, to be honest, the dough was already at about 50 degrees before I even put it in, so very hot day today. But here's my focaccia. So, it's a bit hot still. I tried to take some footage outside and my phone died on the grounds that it was too hot for it to work. So I thought I'd sit in here in the cool of my lounge where I've got all the curtains shut, and you can hear the fan in the background, which I've got plugged in the larder, which is wafting some nice cool air, thanks sausage, over me. But I wanted to talk to you about some lettering, because I do all the lettering for my egg boxes. I do sell my eggs, and it's got eggs in them, so I can't be too. But there you can see, and also if you do it yourself, you can put your socials on the box, which is quite handy. But also if you're giving somebody a nice box of fresh eggs for a birthday present or a gift or something, it's quite nice to be able to personalise your boxes. If you keep chickens, you will probably get lots of donations of old egg boxes, which are really handy, because I do sometimes run out and I end up having to sort of give people in sort of rather, you know, sort of bubble wrapped or something like that. So some egg boxes, you find that the labels peel off in a very satisfyingly smooth manner. And sometimes they don't. So you kind of soon get to know whether they're going to peel or not. And you can, I mean, you know, quite often, depending on the glue that's been used to stick the stickers on, sometimes they do sort of just peel off. But I have sort of tried working around the sort of not very well torn off bits, and it just doesn't look very good. So those are ones for the compost heap or sort of, you know, friends only who don't mind quite so much. But there we are. So there's the egg box. I haven't got any dozen ones here. I've only got half dozen ones. So the pens I use are these ones, which are a brand called Bayoka. I don't know if you can see it. I'll put a link. And I got these pens and this book for my birthday from my lovely mum and dad. And I've just been practicing with various different styles out of the book, but I've also just downloaded and printed ones off the internet, so you can just download these and then copy them. And I was quite efficient here and actually laminated that one. So with the lettering, it's quite handy because these are brush pens and they're actually refillable. You get a little cartridge of ink to put in them. And it's quite good to be doing it on this very spongy cardboard because the brush pens particularly are quite sort of juicy and they do release a lot of ink, and I think if you're using them on ordinary paper they might bleed a bit. So it's really just a question of with the lettering, you're not really writing. It's quite important to remember you're not writing, you're actually drawing the letters. So you need to kind of practice copying them, but when you're doing so, try not to write a whole word, just literally practice the shapes of the letters. And certainly with ones which have kind of fat bits like this, you can go in after those and sort of fill them in. So it's not like calligraphy where the whole point is to get the kind of the flow of it. It's much more about drawing the letters and getting used to the sort of shapes that they make. And after a while of practicing, you do get a sort of bit of muscle memory with them, and you do find that it's easier to get a bit of a flow going. But most of the time you're just copying the letters and do them one at a time and then do the joiners after. Don't necessarily try to sort of write it, if that makes sense. It's more drawing letters rather than writing. So I'm going to go on and just do a few of these egg boxes and do some lettering on them. Sorry, my cat. Oh no, he's not going to knock it off. So I'm just going to go on and do a few of these boxes. You can do borders around the edge. They're quite nice because they've got some nice quite shapes, and you can fill in these round bits on the end as well. And as I said, you can, like with this one, I've done a sort of slightly trompe l'oeil effect with the making it look like a little plank of wood. So you can play around with certain styles, and places like Pinterest and stuff like that has got masses of ideas regarding lots of ideas regarding the lettering styles. Sausage. He's hungry, sorry. He's now going to demolish the wheat. You just see a little flicking. It's out of shot now. So I'm going to get on and just decorate some of these egg boxes, and we'll see how they come out.